An anthology of readings of Almighty God's words. God Himself, the unique, 3. God's authority, 2. The sixth juncture, death. After so much hustle and bustle, so many frustrations and disappointments, after so many joys and sorrows and ups and downs, after so many unforgettable years, after watching the seasons turn time and again, one has passed the important waymarkers in life without noticing, and in a flash, one finds oneself in one's twilight years. The marks of time are stamped all over one's body. One can no longer stand tall. One's hair turns from dark to white, while eyes once bright and lucid turn dim and cloudy, and smooth, supple skin becomes wrinkled and spotted. One's hearing weakens. One's teeth loosen and fall out. One's reactions become sluggish. One's movements slow. At this point, one has bid a final farewell to the passionate years of one's youth and entered the twilight of one's life, old age. Next, one will face death, the last juncture in a human life. 1. Only the Creator holds the power of life and death over man. If one's birth was destined by one's previous life, then one's death marks the end of that destiny. If one's birth is the beginning of one's mission in this life, then one's death marks the end of that mission. Since the Creator has determined a fixed set of circumstances for a person's birth, it goes without saying that He has also arranged a fixed set of circumstances for one's death. In other words, no one is born by chance. No one's death arrives abruptly, and both birth and death are necessarily connected with one's previous and present lives. The circumstances of one's birth and death are both predetermined by the Creator. This is a person's destiny, a person's fate. Since there are many explanations for a person's birth, it is also true that a person's death will naturally occur under its own special set of various circumstances. This is the reason for people's varying lifespans and the different manners and times of their deaths. Some people are strong and healthy, yet die young. Others are weak and sickly, yet live to an old age and pass away peacefully. Some perish of unnatural causes. Others die naturally. Some end their lives far from home. Others shut their eyes for the final time with their loved ones by their side. Some people die in mid-air, others beneath the earth. Some sink beneath the water. Others are lost in disasters. Some die in the morning, others at night. Everyone wants an illustrious birth, a brilliant life, and a glorious death. But no one can reach past their own destiny. No one can escape the Creator's sovereignty. This is human fate. Man can make all kinds of plans for his future, but no one can plan the manner and time of their birth and of their departure from the world. Though people do their best to avoid and resist the coming of death, still, unbeknownst to them, death silently draws near. No one knows when they will perish or how, much less where it will happen. Obviously, it is not humanity that holds the power of life and death, not some being in the natural world, but the Creator, whose authority is unique. Mankind's life and death are not the product of some law of the natural world, but a consequence of the sovereignty of the Creator's authority. 2. One who does not know the Creator's sovereignty will be haunted by the fear of death. When one enters old age, the challenge one faces is not providing for a family or establishing one's grand ambitions in life, but how to bid farewell to one's life, how to meet the end of one's life, how to put a period at the end of the sentence of one's life. Though on the surface it seems that people pay little attention to death, no one can avoid exploring the subject, for no one knows whether another world lies on the far side of death, a world that humans cannot perceive or feel, that they know nothing about. This makes people afraid to face death head-on, afraid to confront it as they ought. Instead, they do their best to avoid the subject. And so it fills every person with dread about death, and adds a veil of mystery to this inevitable fact of life, casting a persistent shadow over every person's heart. When one feels one's body deteriorating, when one senses that one is drawing nearer to death, one feels a vague dread, an inexpressible fear. Fear of death makes one feel ever lonelier and more helpless, and at this point, one asks oneself, where did man come from? Where is man going? Is this how man dies, with his life having rushed past him? Is this the period that marks the end of man's life? What, in the end, is the meaning of life? What is life worth, after all? Is it about fame and fortune? Is it about raising a family? Regardless of whether one has thought about these specific questions, regardless of how deeply one fears death, in the depths of every person's heart, there is always a desire to probe the mysteries, a feeling of incomprehension about life, and mixed in with these, sentimentality about the world, a reluctance to leave. Perhaps no one can clearly articulate what it is that man fears, what it is that man seeks, what it is that he is sentimental about, and what he is reluctant to leave behind. Because they fear death, people have so many worries. Because they fear death, people have so much they cannot let go of. When they are about to die, some people fret about this or that. They worry about their children, their loved ones, their wealth, as if by worrying, they can erase the suffering and dread that death brings, as if by maintaining a kind of intimacy with the living, they can escape the helplessness and loneliness that accompany death. In the depths of the human heart there lies a vague fear, a fear of being parted from one's loved ones, of never again laying eyes upon the blue sky, of never again looking upon the material world. A lonely soul, accustomed to the company of its loved ones, is reluctant to release its grip and depart, all alone, for a world that is unknown and unfamiliar. 3. A life spent seeking fame and fortune leaves one at a loss in the face of death. Because of the Creator's sovereignty and predestination, A lonely soul that started out with nothing to its name gains parents and a family, the chance to become a member of the human race, the chance to experience human life and see the world. This soul also gains the chance to experience the Creator's sovereignty, to know the marvelousness of the Creator's creation, and more than that, to know and become subject to the Creator's authority. Yet most people do not really seize this rare and fleeting opportunity. One exhausts a lifetime's worth of energy fighting against fate, spends all of one's time bustling about, trying to feed one's family and shuttling back and forth between wealth and status. The things that people treasure are family, money, and fame, and they view these as the most valuable things in life. All people complain about their fates, yet still they push to the back of their minds the issues that are most imperative to examine and understand. Why man is alive, how man should live, what the value and meaning of life are. They spend their entire lives, however long they may last, merely rushing about, seeking fame and fortune, until their youth has fled and they have become gray and wrinkled. They live in this way until they see that fame and fortune cannot stop their slide towards senility, that money cannot fill the emptiness of the heart, that no one is exempt from the laws of birth, aging, sickness, and death, that no one can escape what fate has in store. Only when they are forced to confront life's final juncture do they truly grasp that even if one owns vast wealth and extensive assets, even if one is privileged and of high rank, one still cannot escape death and must return to their original position, a solitary soul with nothing to its name. When people have parents, they believe their parents are everything. When people have property, they think that money is one's mainstay, that it is the means by which one lives. When people have status, they cling tightly to it and would risk their lives for its sake. Only when people are about to let go of this world do they realize that the things they spent their lives pursuing are nothing but fleeting clouds, none of which they can hold on to, none of which they can take with them, none of which can exempt them from death, none of which can provide company or consolation to a lonely soul on its journey back. Least of all, none of these things can save a person and enable them to transcend death. The fame and fortune that one gains in the material world give temporary satisfaction, passing pleasure, a false sense of ease. In the process, they cause one to lose one's way, and so people, as they thrash about in the vast sea of humanity, craving peace, comfort, and tranquility of heart, are engulfed by wave after wave. When people have yet to figure out the questions that are most crucial to understand, where they come from, why they are alive, where they are going, and so forth, they are seduced by fame and fortune, misled and controlled by them, and irrevocably lost. Time flies. Years pass in the blink of an eye, and before one realizes it, one has bid farewell to the best years of one's life. When one is soon to depart from the world, one arrives at the gradual realization that everything in the world is drifting away, that one can no longer hold on to possessions that originally were theirs, Then one truly feels that one is like a wailing infant that has just emerged into the world, with nothing yet to their name. At this point, one is compelled to ponder what one has done in life, what being alive is worth, what it means, why one came into the world. And it is at this point that one increasingly wants to know whether there really is a next life, whether heaven really exists, whether there really is retribution. The nearer one comes to death, the more one wants to understand what life is really about. The nearer one comes to death, the more one's heart seems empty. The nearer one comes to death, the more helpless one feels. And so one's fear of death grows greater by the day. There are two reasons such feelings manifest in people as they approach death. First, they are about to lose the fame and wealth upon which their lives have depended, about to leave behind all that the eye beholds in the world. And second, they are about to confront, all alone, an unfamiliar world, a mysterious, unknown realm where they are afraid to set foot, where they have no loved ones and no means of support. For these two reasons, everyone who faces death feels uneasy, experiences panic and a sense of helplessness such as they have never known before. Only when someone has actually come to this point do they realize that when one sets foot on this earth, the first thing they must understand is where human beings come from, why people are alive, who dictates human fate, and who provides for and has sovereignty over human existence. This knowledge is the true means by which one lives, the essential basis for human survival. Not learning how to provide for one's family or how to achieve fame and wealth. Not learning how to stand out from the crowd, nor how to live a more affluent life. Much less learning how to excel and to compete successfully against others. Though the various survival skills that people spend their lives mastering can offer an abundance of material comforts, they never bring true peace and consolation to one's heart, but instead make people constantly lose their direction, have difficulty controlling themselves, and miss every opportunity to learn the meaning of life. These survival skills create an undercurrent of anxiety about how to face death properly. People's lives are ruined in this way. The Creator treats everyone fairly, giving everyone a lifetime's worth of opportunities to experience and know His sovereignty. Yet it is only when death draws near, when its specter looms, that one begins to see the light, and then it is too late. People spend their lives chasing after money and fame. They clutch at these straws, thinking they are their only means of support, as if by having them they could live on, exempt from death. But only when they are about to die do they realize how distant these things are from them, how weak they are in the face of death, how easily they shatter, how lonely and helpless they are, with nowhere to turn. They realize that life cannot be bought with money or fame, that no matter how wealthy a person may be, no matter how lofty their position, all are equally poor and insignificant in the face of death. They realize that money cannot buy life, that fame cannot erase death, that neither money nor fame can lengthen a person's life by a single minute, a single second. The more people feel this way, the more they yearn to keep on living. The more people feel this way, the more they dread the approach of death. Only at this point do they truly realize that their lives do not belong to them, are not theirs to control, and that one has no say over whether one lives or dies, that all of this lies outside of one's control. 4. Come under the Creator's dominion and face death calmly. At the moment a person is born, one lonely soul begins its experience of life on earth, its experience of the Creator's authority, which the Creator has arranged for it. Needless to say, for the person, the soul, this is an excellent opportunity to gain knowledge of the Creator's sovereignty, to come to know His authority and to experience it personally. People live their lives within the laws of fate laid out for them by the Creator. And for any rational person with a conscience, coming to terms over the decades of their life with the Creator's sovereignty and coming to know His authority is not a difficult thing to do. Therefore, it should be very easy for every person to recognize, through their own life experiences over several decades, that all human fates are predestined, and it should be easy to grasp or to summarize what it means to be alive. As one embraces these life lessons, one will gradually come to understand where life comes from, to grasp what the heart truly needs, what will lead one to the true path of life, and what the mission and goal of a human life ought to be. One will gradually recognize that if one does not worship the Creator, if one does not come under His dominion, then when the time comes to confront death, when one's soul is about to face the Creator once more, one's heart will be filled with boundless dread and turmoil. If a person has been in the world for several decades, yet has not understood where human life comes from, nor recognized in whose palm human fate rests, then it is no wonder that they will not be able to face death calmly. A person who has gained, in their decades of experience of human life, knowledge of the Creator's sovereignty, is a person with a correct appreciation for the meaning and value of life. Such a person has a deep knowledge of life's purpose, with real experience and understanding of the Creator's sovereignty, and beyond that, is able to submit to the Creator's authority. Such a person understands the meaning of God's creation of mankind, understands that man should worship the Creator, that everything man possesses comes from the Creator, and will return to Him someday not far in the future. This kind of person understands that the Creator arranges man's birth and has sovereignty over man's death, and that both life and death are predestined by the Creator's authority. So, when one truly grasps these things, one will naturally be able to face death calmly, to calmly lay aside all one's worldly possessions, accept and submit happily to all that follows, and welcome the last life juncture, arranged as it is by the Creator, rather than blindly dreading it and struggling against it. If one views life as an opportunity to experience the Creator's sovereignty, and come to know his authority. If one sees one's life as a rare chance to perform one's duty as a created human being and to complete one's mission, then one will surely have the correct outlook on life, will surely live a life blessed and guided by the Creator, will surely walk in the light of the Creator, will surely know the Creator's sovereignty, will surely come under His dominion, and surely become a witness to His miraculous deeds, a witness to His authority. Needless to say, such a person will surely be loved and accepted by the Creator, and only such a person can hold a calm attitude toward death and welcome life's final juncture with joy. One person who obviously held this kind of attitude toward death is Job. Job was in a position to accept the final juncture of life happily, and having brought his life's journey to a smooth conclusion and completed his mission in life, he returned to be at the Creator's side. 5. Job's pursuits and gains in life allow him to calmly face death. In the Scriptures, it is written about Job, "So Job died, being old and full of days." This means that when Job passed away, he had no regrets and felt no pain, but departed naturally from this world. As everyone knows, Job was a man who feared God and shunned evil while he was alive. His deeds were commended by God and memorialized by others, and his life may be said to have had worth and significance that exceeded all others. Job enjoyed God's blessings and was called righteous by Him on earth, and he was also tried by God and tested by Satan. He stood witness for God and deserved to be called a righteous person by Him. In the decades after he was tried by God, he lived a life that was even more valuable, meaningful, grounded, and peaceful than before. Because of his righteous deeds, God tried him, and also because of his righteous deeds, God appeared to him and spoke to him directly. So, in the years after he was tried, Job understood and appreciated life's value in a more concrete way, attained a deeper understanding of the Creator's sovereignty, and gained a more precise and definite knowledge of how the Creator gives and takes away His blessings. The book of Job records that Jehovah God bestowed even greater blessings upon Job than He did before, putting Job in an even better position to know the Creator's sovereignty and to face death calmly. So Job, when he grew old and faced death, certainly would not have been anxious about his property. He had no worries, nothing to regret, and of course did not fear death, for he spent all his life walking the way of fearing God and shunning evil. He had no reason to worry about his own end. How many people today could act in all the ways Job did when he confronted his own death? Why is no one capable of maintaining such a simple outward bearing? There is only one reason. Job lived his life in the subjective pursuit of belief, recognition, and submission to God's sovereignty. And it was with this belief, recognition, and submission that he passed through the important junctures in life, lived out his last years, and greeted his life's final juncture. Regardless of what Job experienced, his pursuits and goals in life were not painful but happy. He was happy not only because of the blessings or commendation bestowed on him by the Creator, but more importantly, because of his pursuits and life goals, because of the growing knowledge and true understanding of the Creator's sovereignty he attained through fearing God and shunning evil, and moreover, because of his personal experience as a subject of the Creator's sovereignty, of the wondrous deeds of God, and the tender yet unforgettable experiences and memories of man and God's coexistence, acquaintance, and mutual understanding. Job was happy because of the comfort and joy that came from knowing the Creator's will, and because of the reverence that arose after seeing that He is great, wondrous, lovable, and faithful. Job was able to face death without any suffering because he knew that in dying, he would return to the Creator's side. It was his pursuits and gains in life that allowed him to face death calmly, allowed him to face the prospect of the Creator taking back his life calmly, and moreover, allowed him to stand unsullied and free from care before the Creator. Can people nowadays achieve the kind of happiness that Job possessed? Do you have the conditions necessary to do so? Since people nowadays do have these conditions, why are they unable to live happily as Job did? Why are they unable to escape the suffering of the fear of death? When facing death, some people urinate uncontrollably, others shiver, faint, lash out against heaven and man alike. Some even wail and weep. These are by no means natural reactions that occur suddenly when death draws near. People behave in these embarrassing ways mainly because, deep in their hearts, they fear death, because they do not have a clear knowledge and appreciation of God's sovereignty and His arrangements, much less truly submit to them. People react in this way because they want nothing but to arrange and govern everything themselves, to control their own fates, their own lives and deaths. It is no wonder, therefore, that people are never able to escape the fear of death. 6. Only by accepting the Creator's sovereignty can one return to His side. When one does not have clear knowledge and experience of God's sovereignty and of His arrangements, one's knowledge of fate and of death will necessarily be incoherent. People cannot see clearly that everything rests in God's palm, do not realize that everything is subject to God's control and sovereignty, do not recognize that man cannot cast off or escape such sovereignty. For this reason, when their time comes to face death, there is no end to their last words, worries, and regrets. They are weighed down by so much baggage, so much reluctance, so much confusion. This causes them to fear death. For any person born into this world, birth is necessary, and death inevitable. No one can rise above this course of things. If one wishes to depart from this world painlessly, if one wants to be able to face life's final juncture with no reluctance or worry, the only way is to leave no regrets. And the only way to depart without regrets is to know the Creator's sovereignty, to know His authority, and to submit to them. Only in this way can one stay far from human strife, from evil, from Satan's bondage. and only in this way can one live a life like Job's, guided and blessed by the Creator. A life that is free and liberated. A life with value and meaning. A life that is honest and open-hearted. Only in this way can one submit, like Job, to the trials and deprivation of the Creator, to the Creator's orchestrations and arrangements. Only in this way can one worship the Creator all one's life and win His commendation, as Job did, and hear His voice, see Him appear. Only in this way can one live and die happily, like Job, with no pain, no worry, no regrets. Only in this way can one live in light, like Job, and pass every one of life's junctures in light, smoothly complete one's journey in light, successfully complete one's mission, to experience, learn, and come to know, as a created being, the Creator's sovereignty, and pass away in the light, and forever after stand at the Creator's side as a created human being, commended by Him. Do not miss the opportunity to know the Creator's sovereignty. The 6 junctures described above are crucial phases laid out by the Creator, through which every normal person must pass in their life. From a human perspective, every one of these junctures is real. None can be circumvented, and all bear a relation to the Creator's predestination and sovereignty. So, for a human being, each of these junctures is an important checkpoint, and you now all face the serious question of how to pass through each of them successfully. The several decades that make up a human life are neither long nor short. The 20-odd years between birth and coming of age pass in the blink of an eye. And though at this point in life a person is considered an adult, people in this age group know next to nothing about human life and human fate. As they gain more experience, they step gradually into middle age. People in their 30s and 40s acquire a fledgling experience of life and fate, but their ideas about these things are still very vague. It is not until the age of 40 that some people begin to understand mankind and the universe, which God created, and to grasp what human life is all about, what human fate is all about. Some people, though they have long been followers of God and are now middle-aged, still cannot possess an accurate knowledge and definition of God's sovereignty, much less true submission. Some people care about nothing other than seeking to receive blessings, and though they have lived for many years, they do not know or understand in the least the fact of the Creator's sovereignty over human fate, and have not taken even the smallest step into the practical lesson of submitting to God's orchestrations and arrangements. Such people are thoroughly foolish, and their lives are lived in vain. If the periods of a human life are divided according to people's degree of life experience and knowledge of human fate, they can roughly be broken into 3 phases. The first phase is youth, which is the years between birth and middle age, or from birth until the age of 30. The second phase is maturation, from middle age to old age, or from 30 until 60. And the third phase is one's mature period, which lasts with the start of old age, beginning at 60, until one departs from the world. In other words, From birth to middle age, most people's knowledge of fate and life is limited to imitating the ideas of others and has almost no real practical substance. During this period, one's outlook on life and how one makes one's way in the world are quite superficial and naive. This is one's juvenile period. Only after one has tasted all the joys and sorrows of life does one gain a real understanding of fate, and, subconsciously, deep in one's heart, gradually come to appreciate the irreversibility of fate, and slowly realize that the Creator's sovereignty over human fate truly exists. This is one's period of maturation. A person enters their mature period when they have ceased to struggle against fate, and when they are no longer willing to be drawn into strife, and instead know their lot in life, submit to heaven's will, summarize their achievements and errors in life, and await the Creator's judgment on their life. Considering the different experiences and acquisitions people obtain during these 3 periods, under normal circumstances, one's window of opportunity to know the Creator's sovereignty is not very large. If one lives to be 60, one has only 30 years or so to know God's sovereignty. If one wants a longer period of time, that is only possible if one's life lasts long enough, if one is able to live for a century. So I say, according to the normal laws of human existence, though it is a very long process from when one first encounters the subject of knowing the Creator's sovereignty, until the time when one is able to recognize the fact of that sovereignty, and from then until the point when one is able to submit to it. If one actually counts up the years, there are no more than 30 or 40 during which one has the chance to gain these rewards. And often, people get carried away by their desires and their ambitions to receive blessings, so that they cannot discern where the essence of human life lies, and do not grasp the importance of knowing the Creator's sovereignty. Such people do not cherish this precious opportunity to enter into the human world to experience human life and the Creator's sovereignty. And they do not realize how precious it is for a created being to receive the Creator's personal guidance. So I say, those people who want God's work to end quickly, who wish God would arrange man's end as soon as possible so that they may immediately behold His real person and gain blessings as soon as possible, they are guilty of the worst kind of disobedience, and they are foolish in the extreme. Meanwhile, the wise among men, those possessed of the utmost mental acuity, are those who desire, during their limited time, to grasp this unique opportunity to know the Creator's sovereignty. These 2 different desires expose 2 vastly different outlooks and pursuits. Those who seek blessings are selfish and base, and show no consideration for God's will. Never seek to know God's sovereignty, never desire to submit to it, but simply want to live as they please. They are blithe degenerates, and it is this category of people that will be destroyed. Those who seek to know God are able to set aside their desires, are willing to submit to God's sovereignty and God's arrangement, and they try to be the kind of people who are submissive to God's authority and who satisfy God's desire. Such people live in the light and in the midst of God's blessings, and they will surely be commended by God. No matter what, human choice is useless, and humans have no say in how long God's work will take. It is better for people to put themselves at the mercy of God and submit to His sovereignty. If you do not put yourself at His mercy, what can you do? Will God suffer any loss as a result? If you do not put yourself at His mercy, but instead try to put yourself in charge, then you are making a foolish choice, and ultimately you will be the only one who suffers a loss. Only if people cooperate with God as soon as possible, only if they make haste to accept His orchestrations, know His authority, and understand all He has done for them, will they have hope. Only in this way will their lives not have been lived in vain, and will they attain salvation. No one can change the fact that God holds sovereignty over human fate. After listening to everything I have just said, has your idea of fate changed? How do you understand the fact of God's sovereignty over human fate? To put it plainly, under God's authority, every person actively or passively accepts His sovereignty and His arrangements. And no matter how one struggles in the course of one's life, no matter how many crooked paths one walks, in the end, one will return to the orbit of fate that the Creator has traced out for them. This is the insuperability of the Creator's authority and the manner in which His authority controls and governs the universe. It is this insuperability, this form of control and governance, that is responsible for the laws that dictate the lives of all things, that allow humans to reincarnate again and again without interference, that make the world turn regularly and move forward, day after day, year after year. You have witnessed all these facts, and you understand them, whether superficially or deeply, and the depth of your understanding depends on your experience and knowledge of the truth, and on your knowledge of God. How well you know the reality of the truth, how much you have experienced of God's words, how well you know God's essence and disposition. All of these represent the depth of your understanding of God's sovereignty and arrangements. Does the existence of God's sovereignty and arrangements depend on whether human beings submit to them? Is the fact that God possesses this authority determined by whether humanity submits to it? God's authority exists regardless of the circumstances. In all situations, God dictates and arranges every human fate and all things in accordance with His thoughts and His wishes. This will not change as a result of human change. It is independent of man's will, cannot be altered by any changes in time, space, and geography, for God's authority is His very essence. Whether man is able to know and accept God's sovereignty, and whether man is able to submit to it, neither of these considerations alters in the slightest the fact of God's sovereignty over human fate. That is to say, no matter what attitude man takes toward God's sovereignty, it simply cannot change the fact that God holds sovereignty over human fate and over all things. Even if you do not submit to God's sovereignty, He still commands your fate. Even if you cannot know His sovereignty, His authority still exists. God's authority and the fact of God's sovereignty over human fate are independent of human will, and do not change in accordance with man's preferences and choices. God's authority is everywhere, at every hour, at every instant. Heaven and earth will pass away, but His authority will never pass away, for He is God Himself. He possesses unique authority, and His authority is not restricted or limited by people, events, or things, by space or by geography. At all times, God wields His authority, shows His might, continues His management work as He always has. At all times, He rules all things, provides for all things, orchestrates all things, just as He always has. No one can change this. It is fact. It has been the unchanging truth since time immemorial. The proper attitude and practice for one who wishes to submit to God's authority. With what attitude should man now know and regard God's authority and the fact of God's sovereignty over human fate? This is a real problem that stands before every person. When confronting real-life problems, how should you know and understand God's authority and His sovereignty? When you are faced with these problems and do not know how to understand, handle, and experience them, what attitude should you adopt to demonstrate your intention to submit, your desire to submit, and the reality of your submission to God's sovereignty and arrangements? First, you must learn to wait. Then you must learn to seek. Then you must learn to submit. Waiting means waiting for the time of God, awaiting the people, events, and things that He has arranged for you, waiting for His will to reveal itself gradually to you. Seeking means observing and understanding God's thoughtful intentions for you through the people, events, and things that He has laid out, understanding the truth through them, understanding what humans must accomplish and the ways they must adhere to, understanding what results God means to achieve in humans and what accomplishments He means to attain in them. Submitting, of course, refers to accepting the people, events, and things that God has orchestrated, accepting His sovereignty, and through it, coming to know how the Creator dictates man's fate, how He supplies man with his life, how He works the truth within man. All things under God's arrangements and sovereignty obey natural laws. And if you resolve to let God arrange and dictate everything for you, you should learn to wait, you should learn to seek, and you should learn to submit. This is the attitude every person who wants to submit to God's authority must adopt. The basic quality every person who wants to accept God's sovereignty and arrangements must possess. To hold such an attitude, to possess such a quality, you must work harder. This is the only way you can enter into the true reality. Accepting God as your unique master is the first step in attaining salvation. The truths regarding God's authority are truths that every person must regard seriously, must experience and understand with their heart, for these truths have a bearing on every person's life, on every person's past, present, and future, on the crucial junctures through which every person must pass in life, on man's knowledge of God's sovereignty and the attitude with which one should face God's authority, and naturally, on every person's final destination. So it takes a lifetime's worth of energy to know and understand them. When you look squarely at God's authority, when you accept His sovereignty, you will gradually come to realize and understand the truth of the existence of God's authority. But if you never recognize God's authority and never accept His sovereignty, then no matter how many years you live, you will not gain the slightest knowledge of God's sovereignty. If you do not truly know and understand God's authority, then when you reach the end of the road, even if you have believed in God for decades, you will have nothing to show for your life, and you will naturally not have the least knowledge of God's sovereignty over human fate. Is this not a very sad thing? So, no matter how far you have walked in life, no matter how old you are now, no matter how long the rest of your journey may be, first, you must recognize God's authority and take it seriously, and accept the fact that God is your unique master. Attaining clear, accurate knowledge and understanding of these truths regarding God's sovereignty over human fate is a mandatory lesson for everyone. It is the key to knowing human life and attaining the truth. Such is the life of knowing God, its basic course of study that everyone must face each day, which no one can evade. If someone wishes to take shortcuts to reach this goal, then I tell you now, it is impossible. If you want to escape God's sovereignty, that is even less possible. God is man's only Lord. God is the only master of human fate. And so it is impossible for man to dictate his own fate. Impossible for him to step outside of it. No matter how great one's abilities, one cannot influence, much less orchestrate, arrange, control, or change the fates of others. Only God Himself, the unique, dictates all things for man, for only He possesses the unique authority that holds sovereignty over human fate. And so, only the Creator is man's unique master. God's authority holds sovereignty not only over created humanity, but also over non-created beings that no human can see, over the stars, over the cosmos. This is an indisputable fact, a fact that truly exists, which no person or thing can change. If one of you is still dissatisfied with things as they stand, believing you have some special skill or ability, and thinking still that by some stroke of luck you can change your present circumstances or otherwise escape them, if you attempt to change your own fate by means of human effort, and thereby distinguish yourself from your fellows and win fame and fortune, then I say to you, you are making things hard for yourself. You are only asking for trouble. You are digging your own grave. One day, sooner or later, you will discover you have made the wrong choice, and your efforts have been wasted. Your ambition, your desire to struggle against fate, and your own egregious conduct will lead you down a road of no return. And for this, you will pay a bitter price. Though at present you do not see the severity of the consequences, as you continue to experience and appreciate more deeply the truth that God is the master of human fate, you will slowly come to realize what I speak of today and its real implications. Whether you truly have a heart and a spirit, and whether you are a person who loves the truth, depends on what kind of attitude you take toward God's sovereignty and toward the truth. Naturally, this determines whether you can truly know and understand God's authority. If you have never in your life sensed God's sovereignty and His arrangements, much less recognized and accepted God's authority, then you will be utterly worthless, and you will without a doubt be the object of God's loathing and rejection, due to the path you have taken and the choice you have made. But those who, in God's work, can accept His trial, accept His sovereignty, submit to His authority, and gradually gain real experience of His words, will have attained real knowledge of God's authority, real understanding of His sovereignty. They will have truly become subject to the Creator. Only such people will have truly been saved. Because they have known God's sovereignty, because they have accepted it, their appreciation of the fact of God's sovereignty over human fate, their submission to it, is real and accurate. When they face death, they will have, like Job, a mind undaunted by death, and submit to God's orchestrations and arrangements in all things, with no individual choice, with no individual desire. Only such a person will be able to return to the Creator's side as a true, created human being.